I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're going to preview the USMNT's final group stage match against Uruguay on Monday night. As things stand now in Group C, Uruguay sits top of the table with 6 points. The U.S. and Panama both have 3 points, but the U.S. has the better goal differential of +1 versus Panama's -1. And then Bolivia sits bottom of the table with 0 points. To help me preview the U.S.-Uruguay match, I've invited Ryan Tolmich to join the show. Ryan is the American soccer correspondent for Goal. He's been very busy lately. Ryan, welcome to the show.
No, thank you for having me. Like you said, it's been a busy time with everything going on in the Copa America, particularly with what happened in this U.S.-Panama game. So we have a lot to discuss about that game and then looking ahead to what's coming next.
Yeah, so I do want to concentrate most of our discussion on, kind of looking at this Uruguay match. And, essentially it comes down to this for the U.S. They need to match or better Panama's result against Bolivia on Monday night and maintain their goal differential lead to advance out of the group. Just how difficult of a task do you see this as for the U.S. to get what they need on Monday to move on to the knockout round?
Yeah, so what's so interesting about this to me is there's been so much talk about the U.S. having to prove that they can get a signature win against a really good team in a meaningful game. That's really been the talking point heading into this tournament, that this was the chance for this program to show that they've learned from the World Cup and learned how to win these types of games. And it's very much a case of you wanted it, you got it. Because this is it. Like, this is do or die. Like, for this program, really, like, as we know it, the Greg Berhalter era, whatever, you have a Uruguay team that's really, really good, that's beating the snot out of every team in front of them right now. And you have a U.S. team that, like you said, needs a result and probably needs a win, the way we're looking at it. So very much this is you asked for it, you got it. You wanted a chance to prove that you could beat these teams. Well, now you have to. Originally, this game looked like a game where it was like, oh, it'd be nice if the U.S. won it and then got ready for the knockouts, but that's not the life we live anymore. The U.S. Is going to need to prove that they can win this game, and that's, like I said, this is a big referendum on this team as a whole now. It wasn't supposed to be this way, but yeah, this is the way they're going to have to do it if they want to keep this tournament going.
Yeah, it's super unfortunate that this could be the only chance they have to really test themselves and get that signature win. And disappointed, about that because of the result last night. But hey, it is what it is. Yeah, I like what you said there. Like, all the chips are on the table now. Got to go for it. But I guess the thing that kind of has bummed me out that I've just been struggling with is that even if they go out and they get an amazing victory against Uruguay, that still might not be enough. I mean, Panama's playing Bolivia, the worst team. It wouldn't shock me if they made up, a 2-goal differential. I mean, talk to me about that. I mean, what do you think the chances are of Panama beating Bolivia like 3-0 or 4-0 or something like that?
Yeah, it's going to kind of make you look back at that opening U.S.-Bolivia game and make you maybe wonder what if, because what if Ricardo Pepi puts a few of those in? What if they're a little bit more aggressive chasing that third and fourth goal? And it's funny because at the moment, when we were leaving the stadium, the talk was, oh man, they needed more goals to compete with Uruguay if they want to finish at the top of the group. And now the vibe is they needed more goals to compete with Panama because, like you said, that goal difference is very much going to come into play. Look, it's a tough spot to be in because, like you said, Panama is going to be the favorites to beat Bolivia. Bolivia is not a very good team. They are not a team that's going to threaten a whole lot. They could get a result against Panama. You never know. This is a tournament. You never know what's going to happen. But if you're a betting man, you're probably going to take Panama in that game. And like you said, that just means the U.S. is going to have to go out and take care of their own business. They can't rely on Bolivia for help here. This is not one of those where you're kind of keeping an eye on the other game because you're kind of have to assume that the other game is going to go the way that it's probably going to go. So it's in the U.S.'s hands. They're going to need to do it, and they're going to need to figure out a way to save themselves by doing what they have to do on the field and not really relying on anyone else. So like you said, all the chips are on the table for better or worse at this point. If it works out, then there's a huge data point to show that this team has grown. But if it doesn't, it's been made pretty clear now that this team is in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, you're right. Those, having the 2-goal difference in the goal differential right now, you can see how that's kind of right on the edge of, even if we had 1 or 2 more, it would make you feel so much better. And missing out on those goals against Bolivia is really could really hurt them. Just want to throw out a couple of example results of what would get the U.S. through, what wouldn't. So let's say that the U.S. wins 1-0, Panama wins 2-0, we go through. But if the U.S. wins 1-0, Panama wins 3-0, then we no longer go through and Panama goes through. And so you could envision that scenario. You could envision something like that happening. But aside from what happens in that match, the U.S. has a huge task in front of itself just to beat Uruguay. That's a monumental task right there. So let's talk about that match a little bit. Obviously, the starting lineup is going to have to change for the U.S. because Tim Weah is suspended. Matt Turner, we don't know yet if he's going to be able to play. But let's talk about this Tim Weah replacement first. How do you see Greg Berhalter changing the lineup based on Weah being out?
So for me, I think there's 2 different options that you can kind of go to approach this. The first one is you look at the team and you say, okay, let's get our best players on the field and roll the dice with those guys. And if you're going to do that, the move is probably to move Gio Reyna back to the wing and then stick the MMA of Musa, McKennie, and Adams midfield back together. And that way you have, your 3 best midfielders. You have Reyna still out there as one of your best, most creative players. And in that way, you're rolling the dice with the guys essentially that have been the stars this whole time, for better or worse. There's some huge issues, particularly if you put Reyna on that right side. Joe Scally doesn't necessarily get forward as much as, say, Serginho Dest, and then Reyna will almost certainly be cutting inside, so you could be running into some problems with width and everything like that. But that's one option that just allows you to just roll the dice with the best guys out there. The second option is to move Christian Pulisic over to that right side and maybe start someone like Haji Wright on the left. Greg Berhalter said going into the summer that he views Haji as a winger. He says we have enough center forwards, to be honest, and Haji's played so well at winger in the championship that he's a guy that we see in that position. So it would move Christian to the position he plays on the club level. AC Milan, he plays on the right, no issues there. And it would get Haji onto the field, which gives you someone else who's goal dangerous, someone who could do things with the ball, someone who could hold the ball, and gives you another goal dangerous player out there. If you do that, you keep Reyna in midfield, and you kind of chase those goals with a bit more of an aggressive team. So those are the kind of the 2 ways you go, and realistically, it's not ideal. You want Weah out there because of what he brings, but you have these choices here, and realistically, this is a choice that's probably going to define Greg Berhalter's tenure here, in that you got to get this one right. There's no more room for it was a good performance, or we gave Uruguay a really good game, and you saw improvement. Like, this is like you have to go get this result. So you have these 2 options, and he's going to have to pick the right one to get the result, because this is very much do or die time.
Do you think there's an option C, which involves putting Brennan Aronson out on the right, or do you think that's just absolute no-go?
It could be, just because one of the things, and I know Brennan Aronson has some criticism on social media for not necessarily being goal dangerous enough or physical enough or anything like that, but the thing with Brendan is that he tires teams out, because you have to follow him everywhere. He's running everywhere. He presses everything. He makes things happen. So he's one of those guys that if you go into the game and you say, okay, our best opportunity here is to try and wear them down, stay strong defensively, and then figure out where we're going to get a goal, then maybe Brendan's that guy. So that's certainly an option. I very much like Aronson more off the bench, in that you could bring him in to help kill off a game as a more defensive-minded winger, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's also something that Berhalter could do. Like I said, I know they're probably locked in their hotel somewhere right now, figuring out as much as they possibly can from these last 2 Uruguay games to see if there's something that they could find. But yeah, they look, they've been forced into having to make some changes here, and they're going to have to, shuffle the deck a little bit here, which is not ideal, but it's very much something that they're going to have to figure out and something that they're going to have to get right. And, as we've said here, it's a tough choice because there are a bunch of different ways you can go about it.
Yeah. I mean, and another factor that might influence that decision is Tyler Adams. Okay, so he's gone 45 minutes each of these first 2 matches. I've heard a lot of people saying that they don't think Tyler Adams should start if you have to pull him after 45. So I'm assuming this next match, the max for him is going to be 60. It could be 45 again, but I wouldn't envision it going more than 60. I mean, do you think, would you still start Tyler Adams if he can only give you 45 to 60 minutes?
I think you have to, just because of the things that he brings to the team. We spoke to Tyler in Dallas ahead of the opener against Bolivia, and he was saying, he admitted, like, I'm not 100% fit. He goes, I'm not even where I was in March, because in March, he'd be training with Bournemouth, and he had what he called like a 6 to 8 week preseason because he was in full training with Bournemouth, building himself up to get to that point. Now he's only had a few weeks, so he's not fully 1,000,000% back yet. But the thing is with Tyler is he just adds so much to this team defensively, energy-wise, leadership-wise, that I think you have to have him on the field. Now, the question, like you said, is how long do you have him out there? He's been on, essentially a pitch count of 45 minutes here, and they've been careful not to overdo that. He said that he can go more, and it's at the point where, I'm not going to curse on this podcast here, but you got to say F it. Like, you got to say, like, this is a do or die game here. You have to stick him out there. And if he says he can go 75, then all right, we're going 75 because we got to have our guys on the field. So it's really going to be up to Adams, and if we know anything about him, he's a gamer, he's a competitor, he's going to go out there and fight, and he's going to do whatever it takes. But yeah, I think just from a leadership standpoint, just from a defensive standpoint, you have to have him out there when you're playing a team this good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't know which of the options for Weah I favor. I think I probably lean more towards putting Gio out on the wing and then bringing in the MMA midfield. Is that? I kind of took that from what you said as well. Is that the one you favor?
I would personally lean that way and start the game off that way and figure it out. Like I said, if I'm Greg Berhalter, and I'm not, I've not locked myself in a room yet and dissected every little touch of Uruguay. I would say you go with that, you see what happens, and if it's not working, like you said, we have Adams probably not 100% fit, and if it comes down where you pull Adams, you move Gio centrally, and then you stick on a Haji or a Brendan to make a difference. And there you go. You have your more attacking lineup for the second half when you might have to chase a goal or two. So yeah, I personally would start off that way and see what happens. But I don't envy Greg Berhalter for having to make that choice because this is not a choice that he would have wanted to make, but it's going to be a difficult one for sure.
Yeah. And Gio Reyna and Joe Scally, they're like best friends. So
there are some good vibes on the right hand side. They definitely.
Yeah. So maybe they'll have some kind of chemistry.
Yeah, those two have grown up together. They are very good friends, and hopefully you could carry some of that New York good vibes on that side of the field and see what happens. You wouldn't have any concerns about chemistry with those two. So yeah, like I said, I think that's the option I would go with. Obviously, it shakes up the midfield, but you're shaking up the midfield to one that's even more familiar, realistically. So I personally would go that way. So, but look, it's a tough choice. So we will see what Greg does in the end, and it's going to be a storyline to watch all week to figure out which way he's going to go with it.
Right. Okay. So and then Matt Turner, a goalkeeper. Okay. I don't know when we'll find out if he's going to be able to go or not. I imagine it's going to be close to a game time decision, depending on how hurt he is. If he's not able to go, is there any way Ethan Horvath doesn't get that start?
Yeah, no, Ethan Horvath's the guy. He was, I never envy a goalkeeper that's thrown into a game mid-game because that's never something that you're prepared for. So it's a tough spot for him to be thrown in this last game. And he had a few decent moments. I don't think you could really blame him for the goal. That was hit with a ton of power from just a few feet away. That's a tough one. What are you going to do? But I think it'll be good for him to have, that mindset for these next few days of I'm starting. I think that's healthy. I think that's helpful. But yeah, look, it might not be that way because you never know how Matt's going to wake up and feel on Monday morning. He said in the mix zone yesterday that he felt like he was good to go. He obviously made it through that first half with the injury, and before it was determined that maybe they should move on. But it's something to watch. But it's Ethan Horvath if it's not Matt Turner, and Ethan's had good moments in a national team jersey. You think back to the Nations League heroics and everything like that. So I think there's trust there. He's been in camp a lot. It's not like you're throwing someone in there who doesn't necessarily know what they're up for. He knows what he's signing up for. But yeah, it's tough because you don't ever want your number one goalkeeper at less than 100%. That's not a change you want to deal with making. So yeah, it's just another on the long list of things that very much went wrong in that Panama game.
Yeah, and Horvath, he's no stranger to playing in huge matches, right? I mean, he's played in the promotion playoffs.
Yeah,
he's played in big
grinded.
U.S. games. He's not going to be intimidated at all by playing in a huge game, like this.
Absolutely. And look, Matt Turner is definitely the better goalkeeper of the two. He is the better shot stopper. But like you said, Ethan Horvath's a veteran guy. He's not going to be intimidated. You could bet on him, being somewhat comfortable with what's going on in front of him. He's always in camp with these guys. It's not like you're throwing someone to the wolves here. So if that's what you got to do, so be it. It's not ideal, but it's one that you can definitely, hope to survive.
Let's talk a little bit about Uruguay now. So for a casual fan that might be listening who doesn't know a whole lot about them, what do you think is important for fans to know about this team?
This team is good. That's really the way to look at it, is that this team is one that legitimately has a chance to win this whole thing. And obviously they're overlooked just a little bit just because, you have some of the big dogs in this tournament, the Argentinas and Brazils, but the only team to beat Argentina since the World Cup in Qatar has been Uruguay. This is a team that can beat any of those teams. And so far in this tournament, they've looked good. They wasted a little bit of their chances against Panama. They could have won that game by more, but then, playing Bolivia, they absolutely put them to the sword. And that's something that you can expect coming into this game. For those who don't know, Bielsa is Uruguay's coach. He is a legendary mind in this game. He is known for being a little bit eccentric. And he is not the type of coach who will throw out a bad lineup in this game to rest players for the next. He is one who is going to say, no, we are going to build momentum from this game. We are going to prove ourselves in this game, and we are not going to let the U.S. walk all over us on home soil just because we're already through to the next round. So that's what I would say to expect, is that I think Uruguay is going to come out to try and win this game and prove a point. I said they are not going to be a team that's going to start looking ahead. I think they see this game just as much as the U.S. does as a chance to prove that they're a contender in this competition. So yeah, I would say that would be the thing to look out for. For those that were saying, oh, Uruguay's through, don't worry about it, they might rest some players. I don't think that's in their DNA. This is a team that fights. This is a team that brawls. And I think the U.S. is they're going to have to play against the Uruguay team, and they're going to have to beat the Uruguay team rather than one that's a little bit rested for the next round.
I want to try to compare a little bit the players,
Sure.
The player pool between Uruguay and the U.S. Okay, because even a team like Uruguay, I was looking at their starting lineup against Bolivia. Not all of their players play in top European leagues. I think I counted 3 that play in Brazil, 1 plays in Mexico. But is it fair to say that their top players play at just the top premium clubs in Europe, and they're significant contributors? Because the U.S. has mostly in Europe, they have people at AC Milan, Juventus, these top clubs too. But is Uruguay just that next higher level of quality, do you think?
See, I think talent-wise, the two teams are very comparable. Like you said, you have a lot of guys playing at top clubs. You have a lot of guys who are at similar levels. I think like you said, right now, I think when you look at the two teams, the two best or most informed players on the pitch are probably on Uruguay. When you look at Valverde and you look at Darwin Nunez, I know Darwin. I'm a Darwin. I have stock in Darwin over here. I know Darwin has his haters because he misses a lot of chances. We love Darwin over here. This man, he creates 10 chances and he might only finish 2 of them. But, you don't lose points for missing. You the more you get, the better. This guy is always on the end of things. He's always making things happen. And, based on what we've seen with this U.S. defense, there might be some scary moments. The defense of Tim Ream and Chris Richards has looked a little shaky at times against, strikers that are not as crazy as Darwin. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. And then like I said, you have Valverde in the midfield, who's probably going to be the best player on the pitch, from Real Madrid. He's almost overshadowed a little bit by all of the other stars at Real Madrid, but this is a guy that does everything all over the field, whether he's playing as a 6, an 8, a right midfielder. Like, they put him everywhere just because he's so good at everything. But other than that, like you said, talent-wise, this isn't, they're not facing Brazil, where you have guys who start at the best teams in the world at every single position. There are weaker spots in this Uruguay team, just the same way that there are some weaker spots in this U.S. team. It's not a huge talent discrepancy. Right now, it's a huge results discrepancy, and the U.S. is going to have to find a way to knock Uruguay off a little bit of the momentum they've built. But yeah, it's a tough game. It's going to be a tough game, and one thing I also have to mention that I forgot to get to is when you look at this Uruguay team and you look at their bench too, is you could bring in a guy like Luis Suarez off the bench for the last 15 minutes if your team's chasing a goal. He may not, we watch him plenty in Miami. He may not be able to go 90 minutes all the time on the international level, but if you could roll the dice chasing a goal with Luis Suarez on your bench, you're going to be doing okay. So yeah, there's just a lot going on. And like I said, it's not a huge difference talent wise, but this Uruguay team is definitely looking like the stronger team between the two.
Well, I don't necessarily like predictions.
Oh.
But I want to ask you about probabilities.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. You're not going to put me on the spot too much.
Yeah, I don't want to do a prediction either, because I find that sometimes if I predict certain things, then I end up cheering for that, and I don't want anything to taint my cheering on Monday night. But from a pure probability perspective, 0 to 100%, what percent chance do you give the U.S. of going through to the knockout rounds?
That's tough, because I would have said 3 days ago, if you would have told me what's the split on this Uruguay game, I would have been like, it's close to 50-50. Like I said, these two teams are fairly comparable in terms of talent. Obviously Uruguay's, like I said, they got that Argentina win on their resume. They've been beating better teams, but like I said, this is a tournament. If the U.S. can win their first 2 games, feeling a little bit high, they go into this game 50-50. We'll see who wins the group. But it's going to be hard to tell how the U.S. handles what just happened against Panama. Not just, physically, obviously you're missing Tim Weah, you might be missing Matt Turner. Like you said, Tyler's maybe not 100%, but mentally, in that, how do they bounce back from that setback? Because that was a big setback, and that was a big, I think, shock to the psyche of everybody. Because I think, maybe not within the team, but everyone outside of it definitely expected the U.S. to get out of that game and then start looking ahead to the knockouts. But that's not the mindset anymore. There's no rest here. But look, it's tough, because like you said, the U.S. could do everything right. They can go out and they could steal a nice 2-1 win over Uruguay, and then Panama wins by 4, and it doesn't matter. So it's a really tough spot to be in. What I would say is there's a chance here. Look, I'm not saying that there's no chance. I think there's a legitimate shot. If I was to put a number on it, we'll go 30%. Just because if we're assuming that the U.S., if this is 60-40 Uruguay, but there's also that nonsense going on in Panama, we'll just do some math here and we'll say U.S. 30%. I might be a little generous because it is a big ask, but I said all the U.S. can do is go out there, try and take care of business and give themselves a chance. And I think that's going to be the key focus this next few games, is just going out there and playing in a way that gives you the chance to win the game, because that's what you're probably going to have to do.
Yeah. When you were talking, I was thinking about how to answer this myself, and I was thinking 30 to 40%, because I definitely think it's.
I'm glad.
It's
that
less
feels
than,
like a good number.
It's less than 50%. I think it's more likely the U.S. doesn't advance, because A, they have to get the win against a really great team, and B, Panama's playing a really bad team. And so those two things together, I think it's less than 50%. I'm a little bit of an optimist, so maybe I'll go, 40%.
Fair enough. We're in the same ballpark here.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's more likely that they don't advance, and that's going to be a shame. Certainly hope that doesn't happen. I'm going to be cheering like crazy on Monday night, and hopefully we get a better outcome. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's the whole thing now is very much we'll see what happens. And that's the position, like I said, that this team's in, is that it all very much comes down to this moment in this game. And a lot is on the line. It's not just a Copa America that's on the line right now, really. You look at Greg Berhalter's job, you look at the legacies of some of these players, you look at this program's direction, like it's very much all on the line in this game against a really, really good team. So, we're going to learn a lot about this team either way on Monday, and we're going to figure out exactly where they are on the road to 2026. So this is a big one, and it's a big test for this team to show that they're on the right way. And if not, then we're going to have to see what happens and what the next move is on the road to 2026. But yeah, this is a big chance for to figure out exactly the direction that this program is heading in going forward.
Yeah. Huge night coming up. Ryan, I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at Ryan Tolmich, and also to your work at Goal. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And like I said, looking forward to what should be a very, very interesting game, to say the least.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a fellow USMNT fan. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007. And I'll be back with a new episode on Tuesday to recap the US-Uruguay match. See you then.